Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we have more information on this really convoluted and confusing Border Patrol officer shooting. And it turns out that it comes back to really a cult based out of California, Vallejo, California. However, there is a connection to the East Coast, to Pennsylvania, and also to Vermont. And we're going to get into that tonight and hopefully explain to you how all of this interconnects and who the players are and who are no longer around, no longer are players. And what does law enforcement know about this case? And they know a lot that they're not talking about. And of course, the lead investigators in this are the FBI, and they're famous for not releasing anything about this. But there's no doubt that this has to do with a cult, the Ziz cult, it's known as. And it's a trans cult, and we'll get more into it later, explaining who was killed in this case and murders that this people in this cult are wanted for. And hopefully, as we get into it more, you'll understand. Early on in this investigation, we erroneously had the wrong picture of Teresa Youngblood. You see her on the right part of this thumbnail on the screen, the one with the reddish hair. And in the middle, of course, is Border Patrol agent deceased David Mallon, who was killed during this car stop. And then we have Felix Buchholz. And all of them, these two at least, identify as trans. And so do all of the people that are in this, what we would call cult. And we're going to get into it much more. And hopefully everyone is going to understand it once we explain it, because it's not that easy to understand. So folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your cup of coffee. Hold on to your opinion. Hold on to your loved ones. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make the day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, folks, some of the things, I'm going to put that thumbnail up on the screen that shows the players involved in this case. And this is a synopsis that I found online. And after I read it, you're going to be a little more confused, but you may understand it a little bit more. This one is complicated, involving multiple trans-identified males, 4 murders, and several U.S. states. A U.S. Border Patrol guard was killed this month in Vermont by Felix Ophelia Buchholz and Teresa Youngblood. And you see them on this thumbnail on the bottom. The weapon used was the same gun used to kill Rita and Richard Zako of PA a few years ago. And this is the picture of Richard Zako and Rita Zako. The Zako's son, Michelle, is trans and just happens to live in the area of Vermont where the Border Patrol guard was killed. Youngblood has submitted paperwork in Washington State in the autumn for a marriage license to Max Schneider. He's in this picture also. There he is, Maximilian Schneider. Uh, Snyder was arrested this month for murdering Curtis Lind, who you see on the screen right there. Lind was due to testify against Alexander Leatham. A few years ago, Leatham and Emma Bohanian, and they're in this picture also, were squatters on Lind's land and had attacked him, stabbing him with a sword. But Lind managed to kill Bohanian in self-defense. Bohanian, Leatham, Jack Ziz Lasota, and Gwen Danielson had been arrested previously for barricading the entrance of an event by the Center of Applied Rationality. So now that I confused the hell out of you, that is the brief synopsis of what's going on in this case. And because this is so complicated and difficult to understand, I'm bringing on two guests. Number one, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, thank you for having me on. Good evening. Good to see you.
And Mike's all the way up in Rhode Island. Well, I should say down in Rhode Island. Oh, no, up for me. I'm in Florida right now. And we also have retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, special guest tonight, retired detective Phil Grimaldi. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me on. And how you doing, Mike?
Good to see you, Phil.
You know, I want to make it also clear that the victim in this is this great young man here, Border Patrol agent David Milland. And on the 20th of this month, his life was taken from him by one of these cult members. And you see her in the picture right there. And her name is Teresa Youngblood. And all the way to the left, Felix Buckholt. He was killed during this encounter with the Border Patrol. And he also pulled out a weapon. And those weapons were traced back to this person who we listed before. Again, the son of the two victims from Pennsylvania, Richard Zako and Rita Zako. And he, even though he is the son, he identifies as a female. So I'm a little confused, and I don't know if I'm in fact being politically incorrect, but it was questioned by police for the 2023 murder of Richard Zako and Rita Zako. But apparently they don't have a case against him yet. But what is known is that the guns that were used to kill David Milland, the Border Patrol officer, were obtained from him. Zako is not Michelle Jacqueline Zako. Zako's not wanted at this time. They just put this informational out for officer safety awareness. Subject may be armed, associates and known to commit violent acts, including against law enforcement. So, Mike, I want to go to you first because I know even though we put out a lot of new things, a lot of new material tonight, it's quite confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, Billy, you got this cult starts in out Vallejo, California, outside of San Francisco. A couple of years ago, they get involved in seriously assaulting and trying to kill Mr. Lind. That goes awry. There's one of the cult members is killed, one is seriously wounded. Then he ends up being killed by Maximilian. And then and that's in California. And on just about the same day on the East Coast, you have the shootout with the Border Patrol, where you have Buckholt and you have Youngblood, and Youngblood is alive, and the Border Patrol, poor Officer Mayland and Buckholt, they're dead. And so then you have the connection with Vermont, which is the property that was owned by the son, or now what you call the daughter, of the Zakos. So you've got Vermont, you've got Pennsylvania, you've got California. Well, these cult members are involved in these three states. From what we know, it doesn't seem like the biggest cult, but strangely enough, they are as violent as any cult. Like you even said this at the very beginning, like the Manson cult. They are very, very dangerous, very deadly cult.
Phil, I'm going to put this thumbnail up on the screen. And if you can read it, I would like you to do so.
Sure.
I think this is the Ziz cult. So I can.
Okay, the authorities are investigating the connection between murders across the country to the Zizians, a cult of highly educated trans-vegan rationalists. That word right there kind of jumps out at me. We have Amir Emma Borhan and Alexander Samuel Latham, two transgender Zizians who are accused of attacking Curtis Lind in Solano County. Bill just talked about that, and well as Mike, California, because they were squatting on his property. Lind, who lost an eye to the attack, shot and killed Borhanian, but was going to testify against Latham and another accused assailant. And Ziz follow. You're moving it down, Bill.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ziz follower Suri Dow. You want me to go to the next?
I want you to go to the right and read
yeah.
who Jack Liz Lasota is.
Okay, Jack Liz Lasota is the transgender leader of the group who has posted about transhumanism and other topics. Some followers say Lasota is dead, but that seems to be a plot to avoid authorities. Lasota also used the name Andrea Phelps. I guess that's a pretty good idea to try and present yourself as dead. Maybe authorities won't be looking at you so much. Then we have Maximilian Bentley Snyder. Snyder has been arrested for allegedly killing 82-year-old Lind. To prevent him from testifying at the trial, Lind was stabbed and had his throat slit January 17th on the street outside of his home in Vallejo, California. Now we have Teresa Milo Consuelo Youngblood and Felix Ophelia Buchholz, who's the German nationalist. Snyder was engaged to be married to Youngblood. Youngblood and Buchholz, both transgender, were stopped by Border Patrol agent David Milan, may he rest in peace, on January 20th. Youngblood allegedly shot at Milan, who was killed. Buchholz was also killed by return fire from Youngblood was arrested. Then we have Michelle Jacqueline Jacko, which I believe is a male that identifies as a female. Authorities say the gun Youngblood used in the Border Patrol attack was brought by Zacco, the trans non-binary adult of Rita and Richard Zacco, who were found killed in a mysterious and unsolved circumstances in Delaware County, PA. Now we have the connection to Pennsylvania. In early 2023, Zacco, whose blog shows connections to the Ziz cult, is now being sought by authorities.
One of the things I just want to say is the gun that was used to kill Richard Zacco and Rita Zacco is the same gun that was used to kill the Border Patrol officer. So therein lies the connection there. And then we see the picture of Curtis Lind. He's dead now. They attacked him, I think, in 2022. He lost an eye. They stabbed him in the chest with a sword, and he was able to kill one of them. And, of course, then we see Border Patrol agent David Milan and victims 3 and 4, Rita and Richard Zacco. Now, quite convoluted. A lot of information there, a real lot of information. And, again, Michelle Jacqueline Zacco, the son or daughter, whichever you might want to say, of Richard Zacco and Rita Zacco, but he has been questioned in the investigation in the murder of his parents. But apparently they don't have enough to hold him. And this is where, Mike, it gets a little bit confusing because the FBI hasn't released almost anything about this case. All of this information is coming from news reporters who chose, and again, as we said earlier on, most of the national media chose not to cover this case. The New York Post is probably the biggest media we've seen so far that has chosen to cover this, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it makes it very frustrating for everyone. The Post is covering it on the East Coast, and I saw a video of a reporter named No, NGO, I think his last name is pronounced No. He's done a tremendous, he's like a local reporter from the San Francisco area. He's done a tremendous dive into this and has alerted the people on the West Coast, especially in the San Francisco area, about what's going on. Yeah, I think the difficulty lies in the political correctness angle, which makes a lot of people shy from reporting these sorts of things. But this cult is as dangerous as the Manson cult or any other cult you have. We don't know the exact numbers. This may be the full size of the cult between the number who have been killed and the number who are still out there. We just don't know at this point. But it makes it really difficult. And the sad part is, you have the ability of the public, as we saw with, with Luigi Mangione, once the public and we saw this also with the Boston Marathon bombing, once the public gets the pictures out there, and you have now 1 million people looking for this person. And so that would really help a lot. But it is frustrating because you have the Zayco parents who were killed, and the leading suspect, the person of interest, as they say, is dissident, and that person right now is free. Maybe the police would like another crack at him because now they have the firearms that they hadn't before. And the police now have the firearms that were used to kill the parents. So that might be a good thing. That might give them enough to arrest them this time.
I want to play this. This is from the Vermont hotel that Teresa Youngblood and Felix Buchholz were staying at before the shooting of Border Patrol agent David Milan. U.S. Border Patrol agent David Milan was fatally shot during a traffic stop on I-91 in Coventry. Prosecutors say Teresa Youngblood, 21, in the driver's seat of a Toyota Prius that had been pulled over, and that she fired 2 rounds at Border Patrol agents. The following is the security camera footage provided by the Newport City Inn and Suites, where Youngblood and Buchholz stayed for 6 nights prior to the shooting. You can see the Youngblood and Buchholz could be seen here exiting an outdoor stairwell around 10:30 a.m. on January 15th. They were wearing camouflage gear. She never took off a mask, either did he, and the hotel people found that strange. Before leaving the property on foot, Youngblood walks to the front office while Buchholz remains behind in the parking lot. Strange behavior, and you see something, say something, and the staff. Youngblood enters the front office and makes arrangements to extend their stay at the inn. And I believe the person behind the counter asked her to take her mask off, and she refused. Meanwhile, Buchholz walks back to wait near the Prius they were driving when Border Patrol agents pulled them over on I-91 5 days later. You get a good idea of what they looked like, how they were dressed. Video surveillance is the evidence. While Youngblood is still in the office, an SUV pulls into the hotel parking lot. Buchholz suddenly walks away. He must have got raised up there by the SUV. The Buchholz walks away.
Almost seems like they don't want anyone to see their faces.
No, they don't. They absolutely don't. They were up to something, and it was interrupted by the Buchholz walks back toward the office as Youngblood emerges. They were, based on what they found inside the car. Also, obviously, the pair then leaves the inn on foot. That just gives you a good idea of what they were up to, what they were doing. And during the car stop, they found all kinds of weaponry, laptops, cell phones. They were covering the cell phones with aluminum foil. Unknown at this time, nor has it been revealed by law enforcement what they were up to. Phil.
Billy, I just want to talk a little bit about cults in general. Now, there are several different types of cults. Some of them have a religious component. Some of them have, as we see in this case, a violence component. We know about Charles Manson. A lot of times people get indoctrinated into these cults. They tend to prey on people that are lost. Their lives are in chaos. Perhaps they using narcotics, differences at home, split up homes, one parent homes, where a person gets indoctrinated into these cults because they have no one to look up to. So they bring them into the cult. The cult leader has some similar background so they can relate to them. In this case, it looks like these people are generally trans in nature. Now, that rationalist title, I talked about that earlier, that kind of jumped out at me. What are they saying? They're trying to rationalize what? Violent behavior? I mean, if you look at that video that you just played, that to me shows in and of itself very suspicious behavior. So we know that they're involved in several murders in several different states. But the other thing that really jumps out at me, why did they open fire on Agent David Milan on the day in question? They were pulled over. Perhaps it was something that was going on during the surveillance. They decided, let's pull them over to see if they produce proper identification, if the vehicle's registered, whatever it may be. But they decided to open fire on the agent. That tells me they were trying to prevent themselves from being caught in the web of law enforcement. What were they hiding? What were they up to? What were they about to do? These are all questions, I'm sure, that will be answered as the investigation unfolds, relative to that information that you talked about that was in the car, Billy, the laptops, the cell phones. Why would you have your cell phone covered in tinfoil unless you didn't want? You thought maybe perhaps you can stop the phone from being tracked at different locations. We know in a lot of cases that the cell phone information is so key to providing evidence that puts culpability on the person that's arrested. Their cell phone just puts them at the location in so many different instances. When you look at, Mike talked about it, the Luigi Mangione case, he was a very bright young individual that apparently seems to have been indoctrinated at some point. I mean, he had conversations about how the country went off the rails in like the 60s, and now it was time to put it back on. Perhaps that may have been one of the reasons that he struck out at that insurance executive and shot him and killed him. So we have a very dangerous group here. I'm certain that there's probably a lot of investigation going on. I think a lot of the pieces of the puzzle have been put together. Now we just have to wait and see. As you know, Billy and Mike, FBI is always very tight-lipped about anything that they do. We're just getting little bits and pieces, like you said, from the New York Post. And again, Mike hit on it. This is a very, very unpopular topic in today's world, whether it be woke or whatever you want to call it. But we have to look at this. This is something that's very, very serious. And we compared it to other cults, the Manson family. I mean, if you know the story of Charles Manson and his family, they were killing on a killing spree just to kill. So this seems to have some similarities to it. And I think that the national media, as well as the local media, needs to wake up and start doing some journalism here.
Absolutely. Donna V, thank you for this. Andy No is not from Portland, not the Bay Area. He made his reputation covering Antifa during the riots in 2020. He's been attacked several times and suffered a brain bleed. He's based in the UK because of that, I guess. Donna V, Oregon refuses to prosecute or convict Antifa. Yeah, Oregon is one of those states that, I don't know, a little bit lawless. They're on the side of the bad guy more than the good guy. Just to be clear, Luigi Mangione and this cult have nothing to do with each other.
Right, they're separate.
Right.
They're separate. They're just making a comparison about the cases from an investigative standpoint. I want to show how one of these murder cases is connected to the Border Patrol agent's case here.
A Bay Area murder case with possible ties to the deadly shooting of a U.S. Border Patrol agent in Vermont. And both incidents are connected to a Bay Area group with extreme beliefs. Tonight, we're learning more about the one couple at the center of it all. Good evening. Thanks for being here. I'm Julian Glover.
And I'm Anna Dates. The man accused of killing his Vallejo landlord was in Solano County Court today.
ABC 7 News reporter Leslie Brinkley was there and explains how the suspect could be tied to last week's deadly shooting of that border agent in Vermont.
22-year-old Maximilian Snyder appeared before Judge Kaufman in Solano County Superior Court on Tuesday, facing a murder charge with 2 enhancements. He's accused of lying in wait and killing his 82-year-old Vallejo landlord, Curtis Lind, on January 17th. But investigators say Lynn's death was connected to another attack on him back in 2022. Lynn's family posted on GoFundMe saying Curtis was the victim of an unprovoked violent attack by 3 young adults on his Vallejo property. He miraculously survived being stabbed multiple times, had a sword impaled through his chest, and ultimately lost his right eye, according to the GoFundMe. According to the charging documents, Curtis, the victim, was a witness to a crime who was intentionally killed for the purpose of preventing his testimony in a criminal proceeding.
It's tragic, and it shakes the whole foundation of the criminal justice system when a witness is then murdered.
On a LinkedIn profile that appears to be connected to the suspect, Maximilian Snyder studied at a private school in Washington State and at the University of Oxford, even attending a Stanford coding camp one summer. Investigators are looking into a possible connection between Lynn's murder on January 17th and another murder in Vermont on January 20th involving Snyder's fiancée, Teresa Youngblood.
The connection is to a case in Vermont with a suspect named Teresa Youngblood. She's a 21-year-old, also from the same area of Washington, charged in the fatal shooting death of a Border Patrol agent in Vermont last week. The connection there is that they had applied for a marriage license together in November in Washington. There appears to be some connections to a loosely affiliated group of people and ideology based out of the Bay Area with some interesting beliefs. We know they believe in veganism. They have a history of some violent incidents.
Snyder was shackled in court and did not speak. The defendant's attorney requested that the arraignment be postponed until February 6th. Meanwhile, Snyder is being held in custody with no bail. In Solano County, I'm Leslie Brinkley, ABC 7.
So, one of the things I would like to know here, Mike, is what is the FBI waiting here for? And one of the things, this is a whole cult, right?
Right.
So we've seen at least, 7 or 8 people involved, and there's probably more. How do they support themselves? You know, we always say in investigation, follow the money, and you'll find out what happened. Where is the money? How are they supporting themselves?
Yeah, Billy, it's rather strange because when you go back and you look at the Lind case from back in the early 2022, during COVID, there was a moratorium on around the country, and a lot of states passed moratoriums on landlords being able to collect rent on people, and so therefore, from what I read, that they decided they were not going to pay rent on Mr. Lynn's property. They didn't have like a real house; they had like some sort of trailer or something that they were renting, and then he said, "No, you still have to pay me because I still have my bills," and they lured him out of his house and attacked him. And that's where the shooting went down and the stabbing went down. They don't seem to have a lot of money. From what I can see, no one seems to be steadily employed as a teacher, as a computer whiz, as a, working in a grocery store. Nobody seems to have a steady paycheck. They've won some prizes when they were like in college for some projects they had done, but no one seems to be making any sort of money. They don't seem to have a lot of resources, but what they do have is this fierce loyalty to this gentleman, Jack Amadeus Lasoto. He's called Ziz. He's a 34-year-old. There he is, right there. He seems to be the cult leader. And when you think about it, we talked about the Manson cult. Manson was about 5'2", weighed about 90 pounds soaking wet, and it was an unemployed grifter and drifter. And yet he could convince people to kill for him. And this guy right here, he's nothing to look at. He doesn't have a steady job. And yet he's got a bunch of people, the same thing. He's got a bunch of people there who are willing to do his bidding, whatever it is that he's looking for. But there doesn't seem to be any funding. It's a really good thought, because where's the money coming from? It's not coming from overseas. We don't know if it's coming from a chapter of Antifa, or if any money's coming from them. We don't, so far as we know, they really don't have an outside source of income to provide for whatever means they have. So it's quite interesting.
One of the things that we did answer tonight with some of this new information is that this person you see on the screen with Teresa Youngblood is I'm losing his name, Maximilian Schneider. Right. Now, the connection, of course, is he's been arrested and charged with killing Curtis Lind, 82 years old, who was their landlord in Vallejo, California, to members of this cult. And as Mike previously stated, during COVID, there was sort of a moratorium on rent, and they took full advantage of this, and they wouldn't pay him. That's where the altercation came in. And then we've also found out that this person here is the leader of this Zizian, as it's known as, and his name is Jack Ziz Lasoda. And now, what is the whole purpose of this trans group here? Is it hatred, violence? What are they hoping to accomplish? And then the other connection we have, of course, is here. And what we didn't know the other day was who supplied the guns to the Teresa that killed the Border Patrol agent David Milan. And we know that now. But those guns also were used to kill Richard Zako and Rita Zako in 2023. And it's believed, it's possible that the perpetrator in that is their very own son or daughter, whichever way you want to put it. Michelle Jacqueline Zako, I guess it would be their daughter, supplied the guns. But yet he's been interviewed by the FBI, yet he's not incarcerated. Phil, your thoughts?
My thoughts are this. I think that Mike touched on a good point. It doesn't appear that there's a lot of financial backing with this group, but they have to be maintaining some type of backing, some type of finances. Perhaps they're involved in criminal activity, robberies, burglaries, God only knows. And they're traveling throughout the country. So I guess that's one of the components of the investigation that has to be looked into. They were armed with guns. They could be doing, going out doing shoplifting in some of these places. Unless you shoplift $1,000 or more, you don't even get arrested, or you get arrested and released quickly. So that would be one of the things that I would want to focus on. How are they financing themselves? Now, quickly going back to Teresa Youngblood. In 2024, her family reported her missing, and they used the word that she was involved in a controlling relationship, and she cut off contact with her family. That, to me, is the red flag that she was involved in this cult that wanted to remove her from her family, remove her away from friends, remove her away from anyone that was going to have logical thinking. And again, that's how they indoctrinate. They take people into their, under their wing. They get them to follow their beliefs. And what is this rationalist? That's the thing I guess we need to find out. Like you said, Bill, what is their belief system here? The Zizian group, what are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to say, that because they're a certain percentage of the population, they don't have to pay rent, or they're not, they don't have to pay taxes? Really, that's some of the things that I would love to know. Is there a Bible on this group? Do we know what their belief system is? So I'm sure the investigators are drawing down on all of those key elements of this case. But Bill, it's hard to keep up with it. Like you said in the beginning, there's so many names, and they're not easy names. They're not like Smith and Jones. These are difficult names. It's very hard to follow, but I'm sure that the investigators are doing their due diligence.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And I want to thank Carol Grayson tonight, who gave away 5 Police Off the Cuff memberships to some lucky folks. And we appreciate Carol as one of our moderators. And she's plugging Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories 24/7. I want to just to give further, this is from the Spokane Review. They went to high school at one of Seattle's most fabled private schools. They then went their separate ways to colleges where they studied computer science. Former classmates at North Seattle's Lakeside School aren't sure if Maximilian Schneider, 22, and Teresa Youngblood, 21, ever interacted when they were students there. But they found each other again online and recently applied to get married. Now they find themselves in custody on opposite sides of the country. Snyder of Kirkland has been charged with murder in the stabbing death of 82-year-old man in Vallejo, California. Prosecutors say Snyder killed the man to prevent his testimony in an upcoming murder trial. Youngblood of Seattle faces 2 weapons charges in connection with a shootout in rural Vermont that killed the Border Patrol agent, David Milan. Prosecutors asked that Youngblood be held without bail, saying her case is linked to the Vallejo killing and to a 2022 double homicide in a Philadelphia suburb. A federal magistrate judge on Thursday ordered Youngblood be held until trial. Her parents from Seattle sat silently in the second row of the courthouse, according to the local media. So, again, we said early on in this case, when this shooting occurred, when the Border Patrol went to pull them over and they were met with gunfire, we said this has got to be a cult. This has got to be they've been radicalized, because no 21-year-old female gets out of the driver's side of the car and starts banging it out with law enforcement with a gun, with a 380, and kills the Border Patrol agent. And then the second person, of course, Felix Buchholz, he was killed by one of the Border Patrol agents. And Teresa Youngblood, she was wounded. But she'll be standing trial. And from what we know right now, they haven't charged her with murder first degree, which would be the crime in killing a law enforcement officer in the line of duty. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, I find that rather strange. We talked about this even the first day we last week when we reported on it, is why wouldn't you charge her with murder? We know she had the firearm. We know she fired 2 shots at Mayland, and everyone returned, and the other trooper, I think there was a trooper there too, and the Border Patrol, they returned fire. She, thankfully, she is alive. Buchholz dead, but net you got a window, an opportunity to see inside this cult now. Why on earth would you leave the charges as they are, discharging a firearm at a federal agent? Why wouldn't she be charged with murder? Because as you pointed out, it doesn't matter. Mayland could have been hit with a ricochet off the car. If a bullet was fired from a fellow agent, she would still face murder charges. So therefore, there doesn't seem to be any reason why you would not charge her with murder. You got her. You put all the maximum pressure you have on her. Maybe there'll be a federal grand jury and she'll be then indicted, and then maybe arraigned on the murder. But it seems to be a strange way that you would handle a case like this. And I just want to respond to someone in the chat, Moonlight View, I think, asked if this is terrorism. That's a difficult question. We know what they're doing is terrorize some people, but we're not sure what the ultimate goal of the gang was. Like, we know the ultimate goal of the Manson gang was to kill a whole bunch of people. Manson himself wanted to start a race war. But in this case, the shootings seem to be connected to the cult, but there doesn't seem to be a theme. Maybe they just are striking out because they felt threatened. And in the case in Vermont, they may have felt very threatened to be stopped by the police. They've got at least 2 guns in the car. They've probably got a number of different cell phones, and we know they have a number of different laptops. Maybe they were going to go to Canada, maybe to get away from the Border Patrol. Maybe they were going to do a hit somewhere, but they were spooked, and they probably realized that if they did go along quietly with the police, that they would probably, neither one of them would probably be free. They probably would be held in custody. So I think they had a lot to lose. Maybe they were going to Canada, maybe they were going to do something else, but they felt very threatened and they shot it out. That is not the way, a 20-year-old, even a hard-bitten, New York City street thug is going to do with police. Just shoot it out right there on the side of the road.
Mike, when we first saw this, before we knew any of this information,
right,
we said she's been radicalized.
That's right.
What 21-year-old is going to get out of a car in Vermont and bang it out with the Border Patrol unless they've been radicalized in some way? The other thing, there is a drug component to this. In the car, they found some writings of Teresa Youngblood that she was using LSD. I mean, that's certainly not an excuse.
So were the Manson family.
Right. So when you compare some of these cults, Aaron O'Brien from the chat, the murder of Mr. and Mrs. Zalko reminds me of Strangers on a Train. One of the other members did the killing, disobsolving involvement of their associate. Did Michelle inherit money? Aaron, great point. Don't know. I don't know, because obviously that's the financials of some murder victims is part of the investigation. So the FBI probably would know that, because these murders took place in 2023. You think the FBI knows who the trigger person was? They know who owned the guns, but they didn't have enough to charge the son, or whatever you want to call it, the daughter.
Billy, let me make 2 quick points. When we see that video of them at the hotel, now we know that they have aluminum foil over their cell phones. They clearly don't want to be next to anyone without a mask on. So she has the mask on when she's inside the office. A car pulls in, he walks away. That's showing me very suspicious behavior. And then when they open fire on the officer, that's telling me, those two things are telling me they were trying to cover, well, they didn't want to be arrested for something bigger. I don't think it was just having a gun in the car, because, you know, you get charged with a gun. It's not like you're going away for 25 years to life. You know, there was much more to this. Could it be a narcotic component, other murders? There was probably crimes that took place in that area that they didn't want to be caught up in and associated with, because wearing the mask constantly. I mean, we're 3-4 years, 5 years out of COVID, all right, 4 years, whatever it is. And anybody wearing a mask, it kind of gives you a double take when you see that. And they specifically were trying to hide their identities, and then opening fire on that officer just on a car stop. It all jumps out to me that there's something more here that we have not been able to be privy to, hasn't been revealed yet, but there's something more to this. Now, we do know the other murders, but I think it's something going to be more local to Vermont, because if you did something in California, you're not going to be worried so much if you get pulled over in Vermont.
Phil, the connection to Vermont was right here. Michelle Jacqueline Zako. He owned the guns that were traced back. He owned some trailer, I think, that was registered in Vermont. That's exactly right. That is the connection to Vermont.
Well, what I'm saying is the fact that they were pulled over in Vermont and they opened fire on the officer, I think it's going to be something that they did more local to Vermont. You know, I don't think it was, they're worried about, well, something that happened in California across the country. They're very suspicious behavior. And I'm sure if we had more video of their movements over the few days prior to the shooting on January 20th, we'd see more suspicious behavior. And that covering up your cell phone with aluminum foil, that's a major red flag right there.
Absolutely. Dolly Belfiore, cult of cursed analogies. Yeah, I mean, look, these cults, when we think about it, what was their Moonlight View? They would continue if not stopped. Right. What was their goal? What was their plan? Were they going to commit more crimes? Were they, going to carry out their life's goals through crime, through stealing? Say they were very smart. All of them were computer whizzes, and again, as we mentioned earlier, usually in investigations, it's follow the money. Where is the money? We don't know. And none of the things that we would be privy to in our law enforcement career are we privy to now. And as we stated earlier, the FBI releases very, very little. This is part of the murder mystery, of course, of the Zatskos.
County, a couple was killed in their home 2 years ago. Murder mystery in Delaware County. A couple was killed in their home 2 years ago. And tonight, our Shawnette Wilson has new details on a person of interest and other murders they may be tied to.
State police say a gun may be the link between two cases involving deadly shootings, one dating back to New Year's Eve of 2022. New developments in an investigation that had gone quiet since the double murders inside this Chester Heights home 2 years ago. Still, no one is arrested for the deadly shooting of 72-year-old Richard Zatchko and 69-year-old Rita Zatchko. Now, Pennsylvania State Police say a gun used in another shooting was bought by a person of interest in the murder of the Zatchkos, who is also a person of interest in a murder in California. Federal investigators made the discovery after an incident on January 20th of last week, when they say a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent was killed near a Canadian border crossing in northern Vermont after a car stop. The two people in the car have been identified as Teresa Youngblood and Felix Ophelia Bachholt. Bachholt was killed during an exchange in gunfire with federal agents. The woman was arrested. Investigators have not named the person of interest in the Delco double murders, who they say purchased the gun used in the shooting of the Border Patrol agent. Meanwhile, a neighbor I talked to off camera tonight, walking her dog near the victim's old home on Highland Drive in Chester Heights, said neighbors hadn't heard anything since the murders. Investigators then said they found the husband and wife 2 days into the new year while making a wellness check at the home. No motive has been released. Neighbors then said they knew little of the couple, but one recalled seeing the man and that he was friendly.
When we're going on walks, we'd always see him cutting his grass or maintaining his lawn or doing, yard work and things like that. And we'd always wave and he'd always wave back and a smile.
And investigators are still looking for information regarding these two investigations. You can call any criminal investigations unit at Pennsylvania State Police. And media.
So that gives us that one. well, the double murder, of which we now know is connected to their daughter, if you will, Michelle Jacqueline Zako. And that is the connection to the guns. And someone in the chat raised the specter of, how do you know he didn't get someone from the cult to kill his parents, potentially to get their money, to get their house?
Right.
That's very possible. And, from the chat.
It looks like an affluent neighborhood there too. So perhaps there is some financial gain that was met with that death of those two people. So for the cult, for the members.
100%. Mike, I think this also with this goes to the West Coast, it goes to the state of Washington, it goes to Pennsylvania, it goes to Vermont. Of course, the FBI is in on this. Could this be, a RICO case?
Good question. I'm not sure, because RICO, I always think of the Sicilian mafia in like New York, and in other states, and you always think of it as racketeer influence, corrupt organization. And so you have to have like that business, that organization, that chain of pizza parlors that is dealing with cocaine, a company that is supposed to be crushing cars, yet they're stealing cars off the street, revinning them and sending them overseas, something like that. I see the cult, I see the association, but I don't see a company, so I'm not really sure at this point. I would say no at this point, because
I'd have to disagree with you, Mike, and I'll tell you why. Because if you have a group of people, we're going to call it a cult, and we have someone, Jack Lazota, as being the head of the cult. Now, if he's directing people to go out and commit criminal activity, and there's some benefit or gain that goes back to him, that's what you got your RICO right there. It doesn't have to be a legitimate business. It just has to be a continuing enterprise. The enterprise is Zizian, Jack Lazota at the head of it, the Ziz. And if he's directing them, we can prove that, go out and commit burglaries. And, it goes back to a case that I had back in the 80s. We had a similar thing. Transgender people were dressing up as female, going and knocking on doors in an affluent neighborhood. And then once they saw that there was no one home, a woman going through the neighborhood, maybe ringing a doorbell, is not as suspicious as, let's say, some younger thug. And then they would send in, the backup team would go in and burglarize the homes. And I was in the robbery unit at the time, and one of the people was home. And they tied up a maid, and that's how we got involved in it. So it could be something of that nature, where they're trying to orchestrate burglaries, robberies, whatever it is. And if somehow or another the gains of those criminal activity is going back to the head or into the organization, I think you could make a RICO case there.
Okay, good.
When you look up at the screen, the Ziz cult, and then you see the whole story behind this, the two transgender Zizians are accused of attacking Curtis Lind, and in self-defense, he kills Amir Emma Bohanian. And then the leader of this cult, of course, is Jack Ziz Lasota, who you see in the middle there. So it is an organized cult. And then you have Schneider, Maximilian Schneider. He's the one that killed Curtis Lind. And then, so it seems that as it moves along, it gets worse and worse. And they're doing worse and worse crimes. And they're expanding their influence to other states, and they're looking, Mike, they were up to something. I don't know what they were going to do, but they were in Vermont for some nefarious reason.
Yeah, Bill, I'm thinking that part of the reason why they're in Vermont was because is Michelle Zako, and possibly because of maybe some money she got from the parents' estate, if there was any sort of settlement of the estate, that apparently she did, or he did, buy some land, undeveloped land in Vermont, which wasn't too far away from where they were seen with the masks and everything. So it's possible that that connection to Vermont is that maybe they were going to move their headquarters or move their base of operations from California to Vermont, where maybe they thought they'd be more private, something like that. But they're willing to move around, and maybe they just realized that at that time, they when they were seen on the video, Mr. Lind was still alive, I believe, and right around that time, he was still alive before he was killed. So maybe they thought that the upcoming trial, they would move everybody out of California, move them across country, and hide out in Vermont. But they're very I don't know what the term is, amorphous or nebulous, but they're going to move around, and they're not going to have a lot of baggage with them, a lot of structure. They're going to have a car, and they're going to go someplace else, and they're going to hide out and probably hide out in the mountains of Vermont.
Absolutely. Emily's dismantling Delulus, and they say that trans are peaceful. There was some violence, definitely violence in this group. Sassy Frass, I'd like to confuse chat comments too. Wrong stream maybe, but passive aggressive nonetheless. Laugh out loud. Look, I love to read. I love to give you guys your 2 cents. I can't read every single person's comment. David Engel, Money Trail, Snyder and Blackholt went to the Lakeside School, $44,000 per year tuition. They came
Wealthy
from
families. That's
Doesn't it always seem that way, that a lot of disgruntled radicals come from big bucks themselves? Is that they feel guilty about being rich, and that they want to strike back at the very thing that made their life so easy? Phil?
Well, I'm going to go back to the Luigi Mangione case. He comes from a very wealthy family, and there's something that's missing in that person's life. Perhaps, the love and the spending some time with a parent. I don't know what it is exactly, but it seems like when the families are focused on business, and they're not focused on the upbringing of the child, that's when that child could get off into the weeds, radicalized by a group, and you wind up with a situation like you did with Luigi Mangione, a very, very bright, intelligent young man that threw his life away. And from what we're seeing in this case, a lot of these people were well educated from upper middle class families, so to speak. I mean, when you look at that home where the robbery, double murder took place, it looked like a pretty nice neighborhood, a pretty nice home. So there's apparently some well-to-do families there, and somehow or another, these people go off track, whether it be indoctrination through the internet, chat rooms, dark rooms, whatever it is. They go into this transphobia type thing. They want to be trans, and they, some of the people, I think Youngblood, she claims to be trans, but she identifies as trans, but she looks like a woman, and she's born as a woman, so born as a female. So I'm kind of a little confused with that. I think it's just something to be out of the norm, sort of a rebellion type thing. That's maybe one of the components of the thinking of these kids that get caught up in this stuff. But it would be really interesting to see. And I guess the only way we'd be able to find out would be from Jack Lasota, what their Bible is, what's their belief system, what is their goal to try and promote throughout the country. And I think, Mike, you might have been onto something when you were talking about having the land and a secluded area in Vermont, and sort of indicative of Charles Manson's family, so to speak. So that seemed very logical to me and seemed like a good theory.
Hail Mary, what is RICO? I think Mike explained it. It's racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations. It's a statute that's used to go after criminal enterprises like the mafia, like organized crime. And whether or not they could use the RICO statute, which is a federal statute, to go after cults like this remains to be seen. That would have to be called by the federal prosecutor.
Billy, the sentences are usually much harsher when you get charged with a RICO crime. That's why a lot of times it's life without parole. So that's why the organized crime, the minute they hit them with RICO, they're shaking in their pants. They're hiring the high-priced attorneys. The sentencing guidelines are usually very, 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 very high and strict.
Fairy Tale Lane. These are impressionable, challenged youth. Absolutely. Yes. Tiny Dancer, sounds like they're looking at a cooperation deal with Youngblood. Perhaps that's why they're not charging for capital murder. Tiny Dancer, God forbid they give her a cooperation agreement. She killed a Border Patrol agent, no deal. No deal. Yeah, your deal is life in prison, not the death penalty. That's the deal,
That sounds like some type of a strategy on the prosecution side. Perhaps they want to put all their dot all their I's and cross all their T's, maybe waiting for some forensic information coming back from those cell phones and computers that were found. And they have her in custody. She's not going anywhere. They did the first charge, like Mike said earlier, and the murder charges can easily be added on with a superseding indictment later on down the line. And I think that, they may have opened a big can of worms here. There may be a lot of things that were found in those laptops and cell phones and things of that nature that may lead to the other crimes. And I couldn't stand to think that she would get any kind of a cooperation agreement in this case.
Me also. I want to play this from a local TV station.
In 2023, Michelle Zyko's parents were found dead in their suburban Philadelphia home. Zyko is considered a person of interest in that case. The 32-year-old is also suspected of buying 2 handguns used in the Vermont shootout that killed Border Patrol agent David Malin. Court documents allege this woman, 21-year-old Teresa Youngblood, got out of a car during a traffic stop and fired toward police. A companion in the car with her, Felix Baucolt, died in the exchange of gunfire. A federal court filing that News 9 obtained Friday says investigators found Youngblood's journal with writings about using the drug LSD. What she and Baucolt were doing in Vermont is unclear. Now, this could all be connected to yet another killing. Officials say this person, Maximilian Snyder, is charged with murdering an 82-year-old landlord in Northern California earlier this month. Back in November, Snyder and Youngblood filed a marriage application in Washington state. Whether they are married is unclear. The San Francisco Chronicle, which is also owned by Hearst, says Zyko and Snyder are also associated with a person named Ziz Lasota, formerly known as Jack Lasota. Investigators say Lasota founded a fringe group in California focused on AI, veganism, and gender theory. Several members of that group are now suspected of being connected to violent crimes.
Now, Youngblood is being held without bail. Federal prosecutors wrote in court documents that she traveled internationally in the past few years, indicating she has the money and capacity to run away. She's due back in court next week. Police say Zyko may be in a green Subaru Outback with an expired Vermont registration.
So quite interesting, but again, when we first started presenting this case tonight with a lot of this new information that we didn't have, though I think we methodically tried to explain it, it's very confusing. There's a lot of moving parts here, Mike.
Yeah, because it goes back several years, all the way actually back to at least 2020 that we know of, with poor Mr. Lind being attacked. And it takes place in 3 different states over the course of 4 years. You've got about 5 bodies connected all together with this cult. And then you've got the changing gender and the identification of these people. 2 of them are still, out there, and the police are looking for them. You've got Michelle Zyko and Jack Lasota, who seems to be the Ziz person, the grand poobah of this group. But this is something where you need a scorecard, like a baseball scorecard, to remember who's who in the lineup.
That's where you need that flow chart that Billy put up. And I'm sure there's a flow chart that exists somewhere in the federal or the local.
The FBI's definitely got this up on
there's
their
definitely
wall.
a flow chart with all of those pictures on it, and maybe others.
Donna V. Lasota is from Alaska. His father is a computer scientist. All of these kids are like borderline genius. I think the one guy who was engaged, he had like 1575 or 1580 on his SATs. I think 1600 is the highest you could get. That's pretty much genius level, Maximilian.
It's really a shame. Smart kids, and they're involved in this nonsense. It's terrible.
Well, their brains are not in the right place, obviously.
And you add the component of narcotics, LSD, stuff like that, and become real vulnerable,
100%. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and I hope that we shed some light on this, because even after we did the last couple episodes, we were a little bit confused. And we said, what is missing here? And the big thing that was missing was, of course, law enforcement's input or output, if you want to put it that way, in educating the public on what is going on here. And they've given very, very little about what's happening. And as Mike said, this takes place in Vermont, Pennsylvania, California, and Washington. So all over the country, which makes it with several players, lots of moving parts. And we'll keep covering this as as we get more information as this moves forward, because this case is not over and it's going to touch many more areas. And I would love to find out what was the goal of these people. They were not up to looking for real estate. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, this the one thing I hope that can come out of this is because they do have young blood in custody, is that maybe she'll cooperate, whether that relieves her from a life beyond bars without possibility of parole to maybe life with a possibility of parole. But she's the window that law enforcement needs to get inside what the machinations and the back room, see what's going on in that cult. Hopefully she'll break down and she'll talk and she'll try to come up with something. But thankfully she's alive and that the police can use her. They need to use her because there may be some people who we've identified and they may not be the complete number of people in this organization. It might be a number of people more that they're friendly with, that maybe have not come on to the police, come to the attention of the police. So fingers crossed that they can get a lot of information out of her.
Absolutely. Sonny Bunny, thank you so much for the 1999 super sticker. Very much appreciated. And folks, again, if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Ring the bell. Hit the like button. That's how we are shared out on YouTube. You hit the algorithm by hitting that like button. Phil, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. If I was presented with this case, I'm looking at that video that was in the hotel when she throws that credit card down in the clerk. I'm looking into that credit card, see where she's spending her money, what's going on in her life. That's going to shed light on movements. We lost an officer, a Border Patrol agent, David Milland. Let's keep him in our thoughts and prayers, him and his family. God bless his soul. And then we had 2 aviation disasters in the last couple of days, 67 people in the DC area and another 7 people last night in Pennsylvania. Let's keep all of those people in our thoughts and prayers. And this is a very interesting case, very confusing, as you said, Billy. We pointed that out with that flow chart and everything, but I'm very curious. And going forward, I'd like to hear some more information. There's some journalists around the country that would love to dig into this. I'm sure they want to. Maybe their editors tell them not to, but let's get on the ball with that. And let's look into this group, this Zizian group. Let's find out what they're about, what their goal is, and what they're trying to promote. And I think we can fill in a lot of the empty spaces in the puzzles in this case.
Barbara Miller, I know this will be unpopular, but why does it matter if they are trans or not? Crazy is crazy, murderous is murderous. Their sexual orientation means nothing. That's not true. In every investigation, you have to be accurate. You have to know what you're dealing with. That means a lot. Where do they hang out? Who do they hang out with? What is their mind thought? What are their goals? All of that goes back to what we call perpology, the study of the perp. And so I know you don't, what does it matter? That's why I think I just explained to you. That's why it matters.
It matters.
Folks, with all of these cases, when I was in homicide, I used to break all of these cases down during the investigation, actually break down the DD5s, the complaint follow-ups, and dissect all the most important information, make timelines, make things, because sometimes you can read a case folder, and sometimes with a big case, there's not one case folder. The case folder stops at, I think, at 50 DD5s, is it, Phil? And then they start the next one.
Yeah.
So you can read
the first boxes and boxes of them on big
sometimes
case.
there's 10, 15, 20 case folders. Yeah. And now dissect all of that information just like this. You see how confusing this gets. And my job was to break it down and make sense of it. So, Mike, your final thoughts.
Bill, I just want to reiterate, you're absolutely right. The gender does mean a lot because they may be taking mind-altering hormones to change who they are. They may see themselves as a victim. So that's part of their perpology, is what is their world view? How do they support each other? How are they supporting each other? What are they doing to support each other? What if they're taking LSD? That's also very important, the narcotics use. So yeah, it seems rather strange, but it's not politically correct. But who that person is and how they view themselves in the world and what drugs they're taking, and especially something like this, if you're going to transition, that's going to change a lot of, it's going to reveal a lot of who you are and how you think. So it's really important.
No, well, it's on. I don't want to beat anyone up for what they said, but that's just, I think we explained that's why it's important. Beautific vision. Totally weird. 2 Chronicles 2016 says, tomorrow go down against them. They will surely come up by the ascent of Ziz, and you will find them at the end of the brook before the wilderness of Jerul. Hail Mary, our universities are putting out crap. Gritty Gret. High IQ and gender fluid because they can't make it with just one gender. These are all coming from the chat. Erica Olson, glad you're feeling better at Scott Messerschmitt prayers. Chickadee's Raven, they may be smart in certain ways, but very stupid in other ways. Well, we would take the position that if you're committing crimes, if you're hurting people, you're stupid, in my opinion. All right. Bo Peep, love this program and the chat, so safe and respectful. Bo Peep, thank you. And glad it's not always respectful, and when it's not, it's our job to get rid of the
Billy, one quick point. We're not here to attack anyone that's transgender, but there are components of people that are transitioning. It's confusion about gender, different things of that nature. And you even have to, when you're going to transition, you have to go to a counselor, a psychiatrist, whatever it is. Sometimes it's another problem that's manifesting that pushes you in that direction. So that comment about whether or not they're transgender or not, no, it does make a big difference when you're doing an investigation of this nature. You want to know everything about the person. Like Mike said, you want to know what their mindset is. You want to know what they're thinking. You have to get into the mind of the criminal, and in order to try and make a profile,
Phil,
and investigate.
I'll give a very short riddle. Birds of a feather
flock together.
Exactly. If only for that, there is the reason right there.
Yes.
Adriana, I Googled the German kid. He won several awards in mathematics and computing science in Germany. He's brilliant. Yeah, they're smart. But sometimes when you're smart in one area, you're not always that smart in another area. Maybe
there's a very fine line between genius and psychopath. You know what I mean? There's that fine line that's right there. So I think we drew that line right here today, talking about that gentleman.
For sure. Frank Marsha, this is a very interesting situation. When we think we know something, we find out we don't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Frank, I always take the position, and as someone taught me this at one time, I always consider myself through my whole life as a student, always able to learn, never the master. And if you take that position in life, you'll be better off because you'll always be open to learning new things and not think that you know everything. Professor Mike, I'm going to give you the last words.
That we should just, as Phil said, keep in our hearts and minds the prayers for the Maitland family, and hope that this investigation, wherever it leads, will be a successful investigation and successful prosecution, and everyone else and everyone who needs in this cult who needs to go to prison ends up there.
100%. Folks, again, if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen, thumbs up, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.